Have you ever noticed how we spend our entire lives trying to be strong, only to discover at 40 that our strength was exactly in the place we were most afraid to show? For decades, you learned that vulnerability was synonymous with weakness. You swallowed tears in work meetings, smiled when you should have screamed, and turned your sensitivity into a well-kept secret. But Brené Brown, the researcher who revolutionized our understanding of courage and human connection, discovered something that will turn your life upside down. In her words, vulnerability is the birthplace of courage, creativity, and change. What if I told you that everything you considered your greatest weakness is actually your most powerful superpower? That the 40-plus woman who finally embraces her vulnerability isn't becoming fragile, but invincible. Get ready, because what you're about to discover will completely transform how you see yourself and navigate the world. They taught you that being strong meant not crying, not showing fear, not asking for help. That vulnerability was for weak women, and that to be respected, you needed to be an impenetrable fortress. This was the great lie that shaped your life. You grew up hearing, "Don't be dramatic, swallow your tears, be strong, don't be so sensitive." And so, brick by brick, you built armor around your heart. You learned to smile when you were broken inside, to say everything's fine when nothing was fine, to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders without ever admitting you were tired. The world told you that to be a good woman, a good mother, a good professional, you needed to be invulnerable, that showing your wounds was giving ammunition to others, that admitting your limitations was signing your sentence of irrelevance. But this fortress you built didn't protect you, it isolated you. It separated you from your deepest emotions, your most legitimate needs, and especially from the most authentic connections you could have had. You became an island, admired for your strength, but profoundly alone in your invulnerability. Brené Brown spent years studying this dynamic and discovered that our culture created an epidemic of disconnection precisely because we equate vulnerability with weakness. And women, especially, pay the highest price for this confusion. Here's the revolution Brené Brown brought to the world. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's pure courage. It's the most courageous act a woman can do. After 40, you finally understand that you spent decades confusing invulnerability with strength when you were actually just protecting yourself from life. Vulnerability, this quality you so feared, is actually the secret ingredient to everything you always wanted: deep connections, authentic creativity, inspiring leadership, and most importantly, an honest relationship with yourself. Vulnerability is having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. It's admitting you don't have all the answers. It's crying when you need to cry, asking for help when you need help, and most importantly, it's showing who you really are, even at the risk of not being understood or accepted. The vulnerable woman isn't the weak woman. She's the woman who had enough courage to take off the armor. She understands that true strength doesn't come from the ability to resist everything alone, but from the ability to remain authentic even when it's uncomfortable. As Brené Brown discovered in her research, the most courageous, compassionate, and connected people she studied had one thing in common: they embraced their vulnerability. They understood that you cannot selectively numb your emotions. When you block pain, you also block joy. When you protect yourself from rejection, you also protect yourself from love. Your vulnerability is your superpower because through it, you create genuine connections with other people, develop real empathy, not performative empathy, find courage to take risks that matter, embrace your creativity without fear of judgment, build relationships based on truth, not performance. But how does this translate into your real life as a 40-plus woman? When you're in a meeting and feel your idea might be rejected, instead of staying quiet, you share it, even with a trembling voice. That's vulnerability in action. When you're dating someone and feel like expressing how you feel, instead of playing games, you're direct about your feelings. When your teenage children challenge you and you feel like you don't know what you're doing as a mother, instead of pretending you have everything under control, you admit your limitations and ask for help. Imagine the next time someone asks, "How are you?" and you respond with honesty. Instead of the automatic, "I'm fine," you say, "I'm going through a difficult time, but I'm learning a lot about myself." This is the transformative vulnerability Brené Brown talks about. At work, when you don't understand something, instead of pretending you understand, you ask questions. When you make a mistake, instead of hiding, you take responsibility and learn from it. When you have a different opinion, instead of agreeing to avoid conflict, you express your viewpoint with respect. The vulnerable woman isn't constantly apologizing for existing. She doesn't minimize her achievements, nor maximizes her mistakes. She presents herself to the world as she is, imperfect, in process, human. And you know what happens when you stop pretending to be invincible? People start relating to you for real. They stop seeing you as a threat or someone unreachable and start seeing you as someone real, someone they can genuinely connect with. Brené Brown discovered that vulnerability is what allows us to build real trust. When you show your imperfections, you give others permission to show theirs. When you admit you don't know everything, you create space to learn. When you demonstrate your emotions, you invite others to do the same. You have two choices in front of you, and this decision will define how you'll live the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life. The cost of remaining invulnerable. If you choose to keep the armor, if you continue pretending you don't need anyone, that you don't feel pain, that you always have everything under control, here's what awaits you. A life of superficial connections where people admire your strength but never really know you. You'll become that woman everyone respects, but few seek out when they need a real conversation. Your relationships will be based on your function, mother, professional, wife, never on your essence. You'll be efficient, but you won't be seen. You'll be admired, but you won't be loved for who you really are. Invulnerability will give you the illusion of control, but it will rob you of the experience of living. You'll reach 60, 70 years old being known for your strength, but feeling profoundly alone, because no one ever knew the real person behind the performance. The power of embracing your vulnerability. But if you choose the courage of vulnerability, if you decide to take off the armor and show who you really are, here's the life that awaits you. Connections that feed your soul, creativity that flows without censorship, relationships where you can be completely yourself. The vulnerable woman isn't afraid to show her scars because she knows they tell the story of her courage. She doesn't hide her tears because she understands that crying doesn't diminish her, but makes her more human. She doesn't pretend to have all the answers because she knows that real wisdom comes from admitting what you don't know. This woman attracts people who want real connections, not performances. She creates spaces where others feel safe to be vulnerable too. She leads not through the intimidation of her invulnerability, but through the inspiration of her authenticity. As Brené Brown discovered, vulnerability is contagious in the best sense. When you have the courage to be real, you give others permission to be real too. When you stop pretending to be perfect, you create a world where perfection is no longer the expectation. The choice is yours, a life of distant admiration or a life of deep connection, a life of illusory control or a life of real courage, a life where you're respected for your performance or a life where you're loved for your essence. If these words touch something deep inside you, know that you're not alone in this journey of rediscovery. There's a silent movement happening around the world. Thousands of women in their 40s, 50s, 60s are taking off their armor, embracing their vulnerability, and discovering that what they thought was their greatest weakness is actually their greatest power. We are a generation of women rewriting the rules. We're saying no to the performance of invulnerability and yes to the courage of authenticity. We're choosing real connections instead of superficial admiration. We're transforming our scars into wisdom and our sensitivity into strength. Brené Brown gave us the research and language to understand what many of us already felt in our hearts, that there's immense power in being real, in being imperfect, in being vulnerable. Your vulnerability journey isn't just about you, it's about all the women around you who are waiting for permission to take off their armor too. When you have the courage to cry in front of a friend, you're telling her it's safe to feel. When you admit your struggles, you're creating space for her to admit hers. If you recognized yourself in this message, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with that friend who's always too strong. Send it to your sister who never admits she needs help. Post it so other women can find these words when they need them most. Like this content if you're ready to embrace your vulnerability as your superpower. Comment, "I am brave," if you're willing to take off the armor and show who you really are. Share if you want to be part of this movement of women who chose authenticity over performance. Remember, the most powerful woman you know isn't the one who never fell. It's the one who had the courage to get up, to show her wounds, and to transform her vulnerability into her greatest strength. Together, we're rewriting what it means to be a strong woman, and our strength is exactly where it's always been, in our courage to be real.